Thanks for the introduction. It's actually really tricky to kind of put our database out there to teachers. So this is a great platform to be able to do that. So thanks for reaching out and finding me, Pip and Robin. So some of you will be familiar with Sustainable Coastlines already. Basically, we're pretty well known for our big kind of public events. We do a lot of beach cleanups in the summer and riparian tree planting in the winter. And those programs are known as Love Your Coast and Love Your Water. But we also have a third program, which is a bit more kind of recent to the team, and that's the Litter Intelligence program, which is what I'm a part of and what I'll be talking to you about today. Oh. There we go. Our mission at Sustainable Coastlines is to enable people to look after the coastlines and the waterways they love. Really important that we're looking in the waterways space as well, that freshwater space, because of course that connects to our moana and affects the health of, both of them, vice versa. We go for the enabling of people because we are a charity and a relatively small team. It's really important that we have tools and ways that we can enable others to kind of carry out our mahi as well as us. Basically, after 10 years of doing these beach cleanups, we well and truly realised that the problem is not getting any better. If anything, the litter problems in New Zealand and around the world are getting worse. And it's crucial that children and adults understand that picking up litter off the beach is an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff approach. It's not going to solve the litter problems long term. Yes, that litter needs to be taken out of the environment, but we really need to look at the way we're consuming, disposing and using waste to stop it turning up in the first place. We can't begin to solve these issues unless we know what type of litter is turning up, where it's turning up, how it's getting there, and how quickly it's accumulating in areas. If we know these answers, we can start to optimise solutions to counteract the problems. We can start to try and map that kind of life cycle of that litter and see where we can intervene as humans before it ends up in our ocean. And that's where the Litter Intelligence program comes in. It's been up and running for 3 years now. We're heading into our 4th year of the project, and it's in collaboration with the Ministry for the Environment, Statistics New Zealand, and organisations such as Department of Conservation. MFE, they fund us, Stats NZ monitor the program, and then we facilitate the rollout nationwide. We're focused on marine litter, as you can see on that kind of second half of the screen there. We focus on the kind of the beach monitoring. There are other organisations such as Be a Tidy Kiwi, Keep New Zealand Beautiful and NIWA, who are working on land-based litter data collection and freshwater litter data collection. If we get the time later when we go onto our database, you'll see that some of NIWA's data is now sitting there under the freshwater kind of category on our website. And by having that freshwater, land-based and coastal litter picture, it gives us that kind of big holistic understanding of the problems of litter in New Zealand and just gives us a better way of kind of targeting each of those areas. What we wanted to do in our beach cleanups is have that kind of scientific twist. So we did a lot of research and kind of adopted the UNEP IOC methodology. So that just gives us a scientific way of collecting that litter, categorising that litter and uploading that litter so that that data, that scientific rigour is there. The important thing is that it meets Stats NZ's kind of standards for data. And that means that our data can be used in environmental reporting, government reporting, local reporting and actually UN reporting. We're one of the very few citizen science projects that can actually be used to report on the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's an awesome kind of program that can really give your school or your class that kind of a break into that Sustainable Development Goals type of learning. For the last 3 years, we've been training community groups, organisations, schools and corporates to collect that data. So they monitor a patch of coastline 4 times a year. When I say citizen scientists and citizen science project, it means that absolutely anyone, the general public, can get involved and contribute to this data. We have early childhood groups all the way up to retiree groups gathering this data, and we have over 200 sites, 200 groups around New Zealand at this time gathering this data for us. To enable the long-term kind of monitoring, we support these volunteers. We give them training, equipment and the technology to take part in the program at no cost to them, except for their time. When I talk about monitoring a patch of coastline, I mean a survey and an audit. So here on the screen, you can see Homoana School in the Hawke's Bay. They are conducting their survey in the line there, walking through their survey area, collecting all the rubbish within that area. And then in the other picture, that is them going through the auditing process. The survey area is actually only 100 metres by 20 metres, so it's not the whole beach. We're just focused on that one patch so that we can revisit that same patch over time and get a really good understanding of how that litter is accumulating, if the problems are getting worse or if they're getting better. Once that data's collected, it is sorted, so all that rubbish gets sorted into categories. The categories are first classed by material, so what they're actually made out of, wood, cloth, plastic, which you can see here. There are 6 categories here that are all under that kind of plastic material class. We're really quite specific with our categories. So rather than just calling categories drinking packaging, we really break it down because then we can better understand what particular things the community are using that could be causing that problem, could be causing those items to turn up, and then we can target those problems specifically. A lot of the times we say to communities and students, solve the litter problem, stop using single-use plastic. That's really broad and it can be really hard to achieve. So if you just hone in on the particular problems in a community, in a beach, in an area, you can better kind of solve those problems before trying to solve the bigger problem. Along the top there, you can see 3 items that are all related to that kind of drinking packaging waste. That's just showing you the kind of how specific we can get. So we've got bottle lids, bottle neck rings, bottle seals and tabs. And then of course below that we can see that we've got some other kind of food related packaging. And in the middle, in the bottom there, sometimes we don't always know the source of what that item used to be. So we have our unidentifiable fragments that come under all those different material classes. Once the students or the community groups or whoever is monitoring has sorted all that rubbish, each category gets counted and weighed, and then it gets uploaded into our database, which is where you're probably finally thinking, oh, she does link to statistics and maths at some point in this presentation. That data sits in litterintelligence.org. This is the only national litter database in New Zealand. It is open access, it is free, it can be used by absolutely anyone, and that is our promise to you. It will always be open source. Really rare to have a scientific project that is open with their data. A lot of data and science programs in the world kind of keep their data blocked off to the public, but ours is there ready for anyone to use. Our insights page on the website gives students the opportunity to really interact with the data. You can see all those 200 plus survey areas and the kind of litter density issues in those survey areas and regions. You can create graphs on that website and really manipulate the data to create comparisons around New Zealand. It's an excellent website, and that is really where we want students to head, to be able to use and see that data, and just to make teachers aware that that database is sitting there waiting to be used in the classroom. As I mentioned, the government are using that database. They use it in their environmental reporting. They're beginning to use it to inform kind of the banning of certain plastic items. So you would have seen the plastic bag ban a while ago. That was in reference to some of our data. And they've also announced just under Ardern last year, the phasing out of several plastic items such as cotton buds. They again used our database to inform those kind of policy changes. So real powerful stuff. That change is happening top down. But what we really want is the change happening bottom up. We want communities and students using that data. We can't just rely on the government to make these changes for us. We need to look at our own behaviours, our community's behaviours, to be able to kind of solve those problems. And that's where our education program comes in. So our education program is an inquiry-based approach, which is very important, as the New Zealand curriculum was designed to be an integrated curriculum. You should be kind of dipping into all learning areas at any one given time, rather than sticking to this kind of silo method that we so often teach in. The integrated approach is really easy for kind of primary intermediate to slip into, a lot harder for our high school teachers to teach through, but it is becoming more, there's more pressure from the Ministry of Education to teach in this kind of transdisciplinary way. And we hope that our program can be a bit of a vehicle for those schools that are trying to get that integrated approach into their classrooms, into their program. Yeah, I like to think that I could jump into any conference, depending on, doesn't matter the learning area, and I could be able to offer this program because we try and target all the different learning areas in the 4 phases that you see here. The obvious links to the curriculum for the primary and secondary schools are obviously through the mathematics and statistics and the science, that data collection, which you can see in that second phase there under investigation. However, like I said, we're trying to dip into all those learning areas across our 4 phases. So what we end up with is within the priming, there are really strong links to health and PE. Before we even go out to the beach and do that data collection, kids need to feel like they can connect to each other, they can connect to nature, they can connect to the place that they will essentially be responsible for looking after. If kids don't care about the beach, if they don't have that empathy building happening, they're not going to be that interested in kind of gathering that data and actioning some sort of solution. So we spend a lot of time in the first phase of the education program called priming, to really build that tūranga waiwai, that connection to people in place. There's a lot of team building that happens within that phase, and a lot of time just kind of spent in nature and mapping in nature. The second phase, like I mentioned, is the investigation phase, where they're actually going out to the beach to do that survey and that audit. So again, this develops all your lovely nature of science skills, statistical and investigation skills, and just your general statistical literacy skills that can kind of fall out of the learning that happens by doing that data collection. Once that data is sitting there, the action phase is there, that really kind of steps students through, let's use that data, let's analyse that data, find out the problem in our area, hone in on that one particular item we're really interested in, or that we think is a major problem, and take some sort of steps to tell the story about that problem and get other people, the community, changing their behaviour in relation to that item. So if it's cigarette butts, can we work with the community? Can we target the community in some way, influence their behaviour to stop using that particular item? Can we offer them a solution so that they don't have to use that item? So this is all about behaviour change in this phase. It's quite a chunky phase, and it dips into media studies quite a bit. We do a lot on marketing strategies, influencing skills, so that students are understanding to tell their story, to make people change their behaviour. They need to be able to influence. They need to be able to use all those social media influencing skills for good, for pro-environmental kind of changes. This fits well, the action phase, with many of your learning areas, because depending on how the student responds, how they want to kind of story tell that action, it could be done through a video, it could be done through an art project, it could be done through a technological solution. Depending on how they respond, you're going to get all those learning areas falling out of that action phase. After they've gone through the kind of rigorous, lengthy action phase, we have the celebration phase, which is just a point with you and your class, or you and your students, to kind of stop, reflect back at the learning that's come out of it, think about how successful some of those solutions may have been or could be, and then being able to kind of just celebrate the fact that the students have come so far. Look at all the work you've done, look at the work that has been contributing to a national database. Hopefully in this phase, we've got some really cool actions that are falling out of these, really creative minds we have. And for example, we've had some awesome actions already come out of community groups and schools that are already involved in the program. So the one on the screen you see here is based in Taranaki, and they were collecting a lot of these blue foamed squares on their beach surveys. They began to track kind of where these were coming from. They found there were a number of glass glaziers using these spaces which sit in between the panes of windows. They were using these window spaces. They weren't exactly picking them all up. They were getting caught in the wind. They were getting caught in drains. They were coming through the waterways and ending up in the beach survey site that this particular group were monitoring. The group just kind of made the public aware of these blue foamed squares, kind of put it to the public to ask for some solutions. The public ended up just on their own accord writing to these glazier people, these glass and windows makers, about the problem, and said, hey, did you know your blue foam squares are turning up on the beach? There's already this many turning up in this tiny patch on Taranaki. Imagine what would happen over a good couple of years. And the glass and windows people were able to get together with the other kind of businesses that were like them, and they were able to make the switch from these blue plastic foam squares to a cork spacer instead. So it just shows how powerful that kind of data is and how it can kind of drive that conversation and just make businesses that may not be aware that they're polluting, that's happening, that's where their product is ending up. The second one here is one of our biggest kind of inspirations. This was done in Taranaki by Owakura School, and they were doing a lot of beach cleanups, and they were finding plastic shotgun waddings on their beach. They were turning up to the beach a good few times a year and just finding hundreds of these shotgun waddings. And what the students began doing was hypothesizing as to how those shotgun wads were coming to the beach. So basically they worked through a bunch of different justifications as how they could be getting there. They got in touch with Met Ocean Solutions, who pointed out that there was a river close by, a river opening close by to that particular beach, and that if the students followed that river based on the currents, they would find that way up the river there was a clay pigeon shooting range. So what was happening is people were going to the clay pigeon shooting range, shooting, the plastic shotgun wadding was dropping, just past the kind of where it was expelled into the river, would float down the river and kind of turn up on the beach. So this classroom were able to model this. They were able to justify the fact that it was definitely coming, the data was proving that it was definitely coming from this range. They approached the gun club. They just made them aware, asked them a few questions, presented their data, and the clay pigeon shooting range were able to change and swap to a biodegradable shotgun wadding. And this is all just from students. These were high school students that were able to kind of make this huge impact that was a particular problem on their beach. And that's the kind of stories that we want happening. And if you have a little bit of time now, or if you can open a browser, I would definitely recommend you go into the litterintelligence.org website, and that is where all that data is now sitting. There's also a lot of tabs on there that can help your students understand some of the actions that they could take within their own lives and within their own projects as to how they could solve some of the litter issues in their beach. That's actually, I was quite quick and speedy, sorry.
That's fine. What would probably be quite good, Becky, is for the next maybe 5 to 10 minutes, people can go and have an explore, and then maybe we all come back together, and then people can just share some ideas about what they've seen and everything. So
yeah, I usually have a handout for this part, but it doesn't really work on over Zoom. So I have a navigational kind of website quiz that just takes students and teachers through our website, just so you can get an idea as to how you can best use it.
You could put it up on the screen so people could see it.
Yeah, I can try and find it.
I'll just grab the link for that, Becky, and drop it into the chat as well, because is it the same one you shared for HOD Day?
Yeah, do you have that link?
I do have a link
Oh,
to
awesome.
that. I'll just find it. Give me a second. But you could also pop it on the screen. But for people that would like to grab it from the chat,
yeah,
I'll drop it in
thank
there
you.
now.
Awesome. And so if people want to take some time now to go and explore the website, and then if we we'll give you 10 minutes and then we'll all come back into here and we can, so don't go off, but just we'll probably just be quiet for 10 minutes or so while people have a good look around and work through the questions that are on there, which will help you navigate through the website and see what's available.
And feel free to type in any questions for Becky into the chat over that time, or when you come back.
Just one moment. I'll put myself back on mute.
I've just seen, David, your question. You've said, can you talk about stormwater or ways people can be involved in urban environments? Right now, you'll see on the website that there is some freshwater and stormwater data sitting on the website. That's because NIWA are just in the process now of getting that data collection happening in those spaces. Sustainable coastlines are not going to be responsible for conducting the freshwater collection. Just because the methodology will look a little bit different from what it does on a beach, because you're not working with a kind of major big area that's dealing with tides. NIWA's currently, like as we speak, sorting out the methodology for how schools can monitor freshwater spaces. So if you've got a river, lake, estuary close by to your school, there'll be a different methodology for that particular way of collecting data. Right now, I can only help you, I suppose, with coastal data and beach monitoring. Schools can get involved. On the website, you'll see an education tab. At the very bottom, you can click a button which expresses interest. That way, I pretty much look at that form, those teachers that come in and kind of enter their details and their interest. I'll follow up with you as to the kind of closest workshop in your area. If there's no workshop in your area that takes you through this kind of PD, what I can do is pretty much just log you in, log your interest, and when I get enough interest in that region, that's when the workshops will be planned. So basically what I'll do is, if there's enough interest, the workshop will look like a professional development day where I take you through the training and the resources for how to kind of roll out this program in your class. Jess, I got your question. How long does the monitoring and program take for schools? Stats NZ like each kind of site to be monitored at least 4 times a year. We totally understand that that's not appropriate for schools at all times, because logistics wise, cost wise, parent help wise, you can't necessarily get to the beach 4 times a year. So there's no pressure to do 4 surveys a year. What we do suggest is that even if you can just do 1 survey a year, that's awesome. If you were doing the whole priming through investigation, through action, through celebration phase, that roughly takes 2 terms, but it's very flexible as to how long you spend doing the program. So it could take a lot shorter time, or it could take a bit longer. You could do it over a year. If you are also interested in monitoring, but you can only get out 1 or 2 times a year, what we can do is link you up with community groups in the area or other schools that might be interested in sharing a survey site with you, so that you don't have to be responsible for 4 surveys a year. You can kind of collaborate and share out those responsibilities. We have, for example, in Auckland, we have a Kahuiako. They share 2 sites in the Manukau Harbour, and they have about, I think it's something like 8 or 10 schools involved, and they just share those 2 sites. So they'll send out 2 schools a term to each of those sites and then just rotate through so that they're not having to do 4 a year.
I think it's a really amazing option, Becky, for schools. And the thing that really inspired me about it when I started looking was the fact that from a maths and stats point of view, is that there's a real purpose to why we need to know about what to measure and how it's measured and all that front end stuff that we don't often have opportunities to do properly, but we might make it look like it can happen through an artificial, but this is a real purpose for doing data collection. And I'm not sure if people have gone in yet, but going in and finding out about all the definitions, like how you define the beach and all of that information that's on the site is really great.
Yeah, exactly. It's such relevant data, and it's not normal to have such a kind of big database that you can draw from, and it actually is localized, that it can actually relate to the areas that you're working in. Yeah, the most exciting page is definitely the insights page. That's where you can see all the different graphs and how to display the data. You can get all that bivariate, covariate data along the top there, and then by creating a comparison. I'll just show you that. I'll show you the 2 sites that the Kahuiako I mentioned monitor, because I feel like they're really interesting sites because they're quite different, even though they're within the same catchment. So when you compare sites, it shows up side by side, which is really handy. It gives you all the detail as to where exactly you can find that survey area. So one of these sites is in Taumanu Reserve, Onehunga, and the other's Mangere Bridge. So they're kind of facing each other, these sites. And the interesting thing about these 2 sites is that most sites in New Zealand are going to be predominantly plastic. So you have the site on the left here, Onehunga, which is 84% plastic, and then on the other side of the harbour you have the site that is 80% glass and ceramic. So it gives a really good kind of discussion happening with those students. They've been talking about, well, what is that specific beach used for? What is the community doing there that could be influencing that particular type of rubbish? They've managed to kind of get to the conclusion that they think that the one with the glass and ceramic that is showing up a lot, that is a very hidden beach. It's away from public view. There's a big car park there and a playground. Their ideas are thinking that people are going down there to obviously drink recreationally, throwing out the bottles onto the beach, and that's why you're getting so much glass there. Versus the other site, which is very close to the motorway, it's in visible view all the time. It gets used mostly by dog walkers and boaties. So you're getting more of that kind of plastic waste. You're getting plastic bags and plastic fishing gear. So some awesome conversations to be had, especially when comparing sites.
Becky, can you see how the litter patterns change over time? Can you see the difference?
Yeah, so that's what we're trying to measure, and that's what we'll hopefully be getting now that we're in the 3rd, 4th year of the project.
I think it'd be really interesting for a group of students to find an issue and then try to create some action and then see later on if that's if the data shows there was any improvement.
Oh, so I think I need to select a site. So if you select a site and you go on these kind of secondary tabs here, it will give you that average litter density over time, depending on what survey area you decide to use. I haven't got one up there, but if you have a play around with this one, you can get your surveys to show up here. A lot of the surveys, a lot of the groups are obviously not getting out every year for 3 years so far, doing 4 a year. So there will be a very kind of limited window into how it's changing over time at the moment. But the more data we get in there and the more groups we get involved, doing it for a longer kind of period of time, we'll get that little flux.
Vicky, can you go into just one of the
Surveys?
Yeah, surveys, and then scroll down and just show people where the methodology information is?
Yes.
Because that's, I think, really useful when we're using secondary data for teachers to be able to get their students to go and find out more about the data that's available.
So when you click on a survey area, you get all the information here. It breaks it down really well, breaks down all the items. And then at the bottom of every survey, you'll see this, this square here. You can download the data as an Excel spreadsheet, and that's when you can get your students creating their own kind of investigations into that data. You can share the survey on social media. And if you want to learn how the data was actually collected, that methodology, you just click there. It'll step you through kind of how we go about collecting that data, and it gives you all the paperwork that we use in that process. So basically, you can access this and use it how you wish, but if you want to officially collect data, you need to go through the training with us to be able to do that at a kind of at the best rigorous.
Can you click on the beach surface photo reference guide and just sort of pulling so towards the bottom there?
Oh, hang on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
the other data that we collect pretty much as we're going. So the app that you will use to log in where your survey is, it will ask you these questions. So it will say, what is the beach surface? So we're collecting all this other data as well, which could, of course, affect the litter.
yeah. And just for the teachers, just that's really useful when we're trying to work out, you know, what we measured and how. So this is a really good example of classification system, and then there's another one there. So there's lots of really, really good stuff in here for you to use with your students, even if you're not doing the official collection and you're just using the data secondhand. Yeah. You can send the kids off to work out what all the different variables are by going to these different pieces of information. And also when you download the spreadsheet, there's 4 tabs as well as the data that talk about what the variables are and what they mean. So there's quite a lot of background information for teachers and students on what the variables are in the session.
Yeah, and with that, like what a lot of teachers do is if they just want to start auditing the waste that their classroom is using or their homes are using, they use our litter categories, so they'll use our same categories to kind of audit that data. And this is what I'm talking about when NIWA are using our methodology, like some of our methodology, they're going to categorize in the same way that we do. Just as I think it's Tread Lightly Caravan are doing a lot of work with those litter traps that sit in the drains. They're getting a lot of schools to audit that rubbish using these categories as well. So eventually we'll have all that data uploaded into the one database, so we get that kind of overview. But these are great to use as well, just for your own use in the class.
Are there any other questions that people have out there for Becky about the website or anything related to the litter collection?
A lot to take in, sorry, and I sped through that.
No, I think it's wonderful that people have had an opportunity to see it, and we are always quite busy and we don't often have time to just stop and look at something new. So it's wonderful. Jared, have you got anything else you want to ask?
No, I'm pretty keen to talk to our science and maybe in our social studies department about getting us involved in this. Yeah, and have a little bit of a better look at it. And
I just point you to the fact that Point Cheverly Primary School, one of the year one teachers was quite interested in litter, so I can probably hook you up with them as well.
Yeah,
So it might be really nice for people to talk to their local primary schools and see if there's maybe a group of you, if you were keen to follow this through as well.
And what we do with our professional development days, what we offer is that we take you obviously through the resources and the training so you are equipped to doing this, but we cover your teacher relief funding for up to 2 teachers per school, which I think is really rare as well. So yeah, look out on our website under events, and if you express interest, like I said, I can update you when we've got a workshop in your area, and try and get you along to that if you're interested.
Well, teacher relief, everybody would be signing up.
You'd think so. You'd think so.
Awesome. All right, well, Becky, if there's nothing else, I might just do the wrap